Hi folks, tonight I'm going to talk about another book. This is called Grandpa the Sniper. It's by Frank Shouldice. It's about his grandfather Frank Shouldice and his family who took part in the 1916 Rising. They hail from Ballahadreen, County Mayo, and Frank himself, he was deployed as a sniper in a place called O'Reilly's Fort, where they held up against British forces for more than 5 days before retreating back to the GPO. Subsequently, they were captured. They were brought to English prisons. Ireland was declared under martial law, and a lot of people were very upset with the Rising. After they were incarcerated, the question about Irish independence was raised in Parliament by the likes of John Dillon, and so much so that this was in the backdrop of the First World War. They were talking about the Irish question so much so because they were concerned that if England was seen to be mistreating the smaller countries, then what the hell were they doing fighting in the big war for the small countries? And secondly, Ireland's ties with America, there was concern there that if the Irish were treated badly, then of course America would be less than willing to join England in the Great War. He was subsequently released. Sinn Féin won a landslide victory against the Irish Independent Party, and instead of the Sinn Féin taking up their seats in Westminster, they instead decided to set up the Dáil, the first Dáil in Ireland, the first government in Ireland, and from there they went on to get independence from Ireland. Frank, during that time, he was arrested 3 different times. He decided not to take part in the Irish Civil War, and he instead chose to raise a family, and he held down a job in the civil service, and he attended all the 1916 commemorations afterwards up until about 1975. What rings bells for me about this book, it was about the level of volunteerism that was prevalent in Irish society back at the time. Before 1916, you had the likes of Cumann na Gael, Cumann na Mán, the GAA, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and at that time, those organisations were concerned with women's rights, for example, the preservation of the Irish language, the culture, the sport, and raising funds abroad from America and Russia. There was something there about Russian jewels. But the point being there was that there was voluntary organisations in place in Ireland prior to 1916. And of course, when the Great War started, England started looking to Northern Ireland and they wanted to bring in a conscription act, which was pretty concerning, especially to the Irish people. And those that were involved in Cumann na Mán and Cumann na Gael and the IRB, they got together and they had a good talk about it, and they came up with the conclusion that they should, instead of going to the Somme, that they should fight in an armed insurrection. At the time before the 16 Rising started, the IRB in the Cumann na Gael, there was an awful lot of IRB membership inside in Cumann na Gael, and something that happened there was that they used Cumann na Gael to transmit, to put out the message that there was going to be a rising going ahead at Easter time, and the president for Cumann na Gael then put out an advertisement on the local newspapers to say there's nothing going to happen in Easter on Easter, and that created the confusion where the rising nearly didn't happen. Only half the volunteers actually turned up, but the other half that did actually turn up went on to fight. that rings a bell. That's, that sort of thing can happen, and you have to be watchful of something like that, especially when a secret organization takes over your organization. That's something to watch out for. So anyways, where was I? After the 1916 Rising, public opinion of the Rising itself was negative. However, during the incarceration of the prisoners and the subsequent shooting of the leaders of the Rising, Parliament, John Dillon, a member of Parliament for East Mayo, made a lot of trouble in the British Parliament over the Irish question, so much so that in the end the prisoners were all let go, and subsequent to that, Sinn Féin won landslide victories over the Irish Independence Party, and they of course won seats in Westminster, but of course Sinn Féin did not sit at Westminster. Instead, they set up their own Dáil in Dublin, and it wasn't just the political talk shop that they set up. They not only did they set up the Dáil, but they also set up the court system, taxation, and policing, if you could call it that. What they were doing was they supplanted whatever British authority that was in Ireland at the time was basically nullified, because instead of going to the English courts, people started going to the Irish courts. Instead of paying British taxes, they started paying Irish taxes. And as a result of that, it was observed by an RIC official that the Republicans were running the country like they actually had a republic. Subsequent to that, the reason they were able to do something like that was obviously they must have had hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteers committing their time and energy into this, who all felt very strongly that this was the best way to go. And it's beautiful to see that was our legacy. And because of their commitment to Irish independence, we gained our independence. Frank saw the Ireland raised the tricolour as he was leaving Mountjoy prison. He didn't get involved in the Civil War, like I said before. At that stage of his life, when he first started out, he was a lieutenant, and subsequent to that, he was heavily involved in the GAA and whatever organisations that he was involved in. It took an awful lot of time and energy out of him, so much so that by the time he left prison, he was pushing 35, 36. He was more interested in setting up a family and settling down to a quiet life, and because of that, it was noted in his biography that because he didn't take sides in the Civil War, that he was almost shunned. And that rings a bell when it comes to being a volunteer in any organisation. At first, when you start out, people look at you as if you're a bit nuts. As time goes on, they start to respect you, and you're admired for and respected for your commitment to the work. And then later on, you become more peripheral. You have less energy and time for the organisation, and eventually you become an external. And the best way to become an external in an organisation would be to have a bit of emotional maturity about it. You have to say to yourself, well, look, I've done my bit. It's time for me to move on, and to leave that organisation in a better position than before you joined it. Today, in terms of voluntary organisations, we have the GAA and we have Foróige. In the GAA, I'm looking forward to when the pandemic is gone, because the GAA is a fantastic organisation. It It has jobs for everyone. As soon as you hit 6 years old, you're on the football pitch, you're being trained up, and mammies, mammies are looking after the girls' football, and daddies are looking after the boys' football. And it really is a job for life, a voluntary job. Um, Likewise with Feroiga as well, it's all about teenagers exploring healthy relationships and having a social, having a good time when they're in their teenage years, because it's very important that a young person has positive memories going into their adulthood. Um, that being said, those two organisations are so large now that they are actually able to employ or keep people employed full time, or at least part time as well, in terms of keeping jobs in the economy. It's great to see that voluntary organisations, once they get large enough, that they have solutions for everything, and I think Ireland is a great example of how far a voluntary organisation can change society and make things better for everyone. So that's all I have to say tonight. Grandpa the Sniper, fantastic read, very good. It had everything you need to know about the Rising in Ireland afterwards. Take care.